I forget which. There we go. Okay, so we are going to pop on here with Javon Lee. Hey, Javon, how's it going down there in Taos?
Rose, it's going good. Yeah.
Good.
Cold. I'm very cold. That's why I'm all down up in my studio. I had the ventilation going and I'm freezing. But other than that, I'm fine.
Oh, wow. Because it's like 75 here today.
Really?
No,
oh, yeah. No,
it's really 64. It's 64. It might as well be 75. It's kind of ridiculously warm here, but yeah. And you probably don't have any snow either, do you?
Not a ton, a little bit in the mountains. I was hiking the other day. There's, 6 inches on the ground or so, but not a lot yet.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, you're lucky. Well, that's good. We still have 0. But anyway, all right. That's not what we're not here to talk about the weather. Although with you, we are going to talk about the weather. We are. Yeah. Because you are the craziest plein air artist I know.
Thank you. I accept.
Yeah, you're welcome. So for those of you who do not know Javon Lee, you really must follow him on social media, especially Instagram. And do you do these on Facebook? You do live?
Mostly Instagram. Yeah. Facebook's not so much. Instagram basically only. Yeah.
Yeah. So Instagram live. So you can hop on live conversations with Javon that are really interesting and engaging. And so definitely all of our artists follow on social media. It's really fun to see what's new and coming out of the studio. But Javon also does these great talks. And you can find some wonderful videos about, I'm not kidding, he is the craziest plein air artist you ever want to meet. So plein air, by plein air, it means he schleps his studio outside. He takes his canvas, he takes a palette that is about, no lie, like what, 4 feet across?
Between the two, yeah, I have like a little plastic bins that slide under the beds, and I get those and I put them in the back of my truck, and so I have 2 lids, and it's like each one's 20 by 40, so probably like 40 square inches or more. I have extra in case I need more space.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just really amazing. And sometimes when you see his paintings, I've seen him with grass and hay and rocks, and there's like, these are really painted outside on location.
All the flora and fauna up in there. Some grasshoppers. I had one piece I went out and painted with the gnats were out at some season, and like everybody on social media actually was tuned in the day it happened. And as I painted, the painting got more and more covered with bugs to the point that it looked like it was like the inverse of the night sky. I had just hundreds of them all in the piece. For some reason, I painted the wrong bug spot that day. So sometimes bugs too,
Oh my God. Wow. Well, hey, you know what? Speaking of bugs, let's just get right into this big piece. And I have to tell you, you haven't seen the show in person yet, but this big painting is like, kind of when you walk in the door and turn to the left, it's like, pow.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm going to do a screen share, and I'm going to pull this up and make it nice and big. But this painting, 48 inches tall, it's 2 panels that come to 120 wide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Where was this? And is this one that you actually did out on location?
Yes. Yeah. So this is, like a lot of my work is based on a series that I'm working on in one spot. This is a set I call Homeward because it looks across Taos Valley I'm on the east side on this Blueberry Hill, it's called for some unknown reason. And then it looks across Taos Valley to the Sangre de Cristos on the west side. I'm sorry, reverse that. I'm on the west side. It looks across to the east side. And my house is actually, theoretically visible in some portion of the painting, though I didn't actually paint my house. It's just where it is. But yeah, this is a spot in Taos that gets really, it's particular in the sense that I can be on the Blueberry Hill, and it generally doesn't rain on top of me, but across the valley on top of the mountains, all those thunderheads that you see popping up in this painting, they develop there, for a while, and it takes an hour or 2 before the thunderheads start to develop on top of me, and I have to pack up and go. So it's one of my favorite summertime locations.
Wow.
And this particular piece was made in August of this year. And like you said, it's 4x10. So it's on 2 panels for practical reasons as well as conceptual ones. But the practical reason being that sorry if you guys hear the background noise. Big truck just started. But the practical reason being that I have only so much space in the back of my truck. My pickup is 6 feet long. So I have to limit the panel size to that unless I'm really nuts and have a painting sticking out of the back of the truck on the way to the studio.
Or just bungee it. Just bungee it.
I've done it. I've done it. I have had ones as long as 8 feet, 2 feet sticking out of the back of the truck, wet painting.
Oh God.
It's a mess.
Why does this not surprise me?
Yeah, you do what you got to do. So,
right.
Yeah.
Hey, so do you don't do this whole painting in one fell swoop, right? This is a number of.
No, I I get that question a lot, right? Like, how long does it take me to do a painting? So if I want to be all on location, I usually have to go back multiple days in a row at the same time. I don't generally try and finish things in one swoop. I mean, if it happens, great. I'm not, attached to any particular degree of resolution in terms of imagery. And if I think a painting is working on, in a formal sense, if its composition is compelling, if something's really working on a more abstract level, that's fine. But usually it takes me, on location sessions that then I bring back into the studio and work on in the studio for, could be a few hours, it could be a few days, it could be a week or more. Mostly that's just looking at the piece though, and then carefully sort of pruning down areas that don't make sense, but trying to keep as much wildness as I can in the process.
Yeah. So you work in oils. So oil does not dry very quickly. And so that gives you room to play, right? So if you keep going back.
Some, yeah. I mean, some, in the case of the paints I use, it depends pigment to pigment, which ones dry faster or slower. So there's a little bit of a kind of juggling act, and I have to be pretty mindful of where I know is going to be, dry in a day versus dry in 3 days. But generally I have a window of about 4 days that I can work in some portion of the painting strategically, depending on what's going to dry soonest and, slowest.
Okay.
And then after that, because I have so much texture, I really can't return to my pieces. So my process these days is a little bit different than maybe it used to be. And so I have to basically make all my decisions in one burst and then wait 6 months if I change my mind and go back to it and bring a chisel to chisel off the layers of.
Or just like a sanding tool, right? Just.
I can't just use a sanding tool. I really do actually have to get a chisel, like
really
off and stuff. Yeah, my panels. I use them because they're really great. The paint adheres to them exceptionally well. Yeah. But I used to try and reuse the bad paintings and have my frame shop actually resurface sand down all the paint. But they found they couldn't really get the paint off very well. So it's a delicate process if I really think I screwed up. But usually by that time, I have gotten to a point where I don't think I ruined it.
Yeah. Hey, so remind me, you moved out to New Mexico from the East Coast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from upstate New York. I grew up in the Hudson Valley, and Woodstock was where I was born, and then in the Catskill Mountains. So the area of the Hudson River, school painters and all that. Frank Church's Olano is not far from my college that I went to, Bard College in the Hudson Valley, and then I did a road trip out west and didn't make it farther than Albuquerque.
Wow. And that's it. And you just stayed.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's such a dramatic change from the humidity and kind of the closeness of everything on the east because of the trees and and just just sort of the air and the thickness of the air as compared to the west. And so was there a change, or was this something that you just really embraced, the difference in color palette and atmosphere?
Yeah, well, I mean, prior to coming out here, I wasn't painting landscapes hardly at all. So, before whatever, 10-ish years ago, 2008, 2009, I painted interiors and figures in interior spaces more. And so I didn't have much to compare. I'd done one landscape and outdoors on my own that I can remember on the East Coast. So this is kind of where I started. So comparatively, the desert west here and the nature of the storms is what I'm most familiar working with.
Yeah.
Since then, I've painted in Maine and stuff, and there are some pretty big differences. The way rain falls here and the way it
Mm.
falls in Scotland or in Maine is distinct. And so like my setup out here wouldn't work as well on the East Coast necessarily without some adjustments and stuff like that. But palette wise, color wise, I feel like, I put the same colors out every day I go out and paint. And for me, there's something kind of wonderful in the fact that
Mm.
from this sort of group of common color, common elements, the entire variety of the world can sort of be found. And so on the East Coast it's grayer, but there's so much purple and yellow and whatever, blue and gray, that you would be amazed. And some beautiful bright cloud can seem like it's only white, but actually it's got a tremendous amount of yellow or a ton of these highlights of green that you would think would only show up on the East Coast or whatever. The
Yeah.
sort of visual mystery of it, I think, is pretty compelling, and therefore the palette, proportions of what ends up on a painting change, but the actual base colors that are available are pretty similar across any painting I do.
So behind you are all these small, I'm going to call them studies, but these small pieces. And I'm just going to stop the screen share really quick just to kind of take a look behind you. And then I want to go back, and you've got 3 other paintings that I really want to talk about. But tell me about these studies, because they're like you're moving through different color shifts and tonalities. And what is this? Are these exercises? Are you trying to formulate ideas, or?
Yeah, so this is the finished sort of whole kit and caboodle. And this is a project ongoing, which you have 3 of the paintings from, sort of special outlier, special thing that there are any individual panels from the summer season. So right here is a season of summer paintings that I painted over the course of the summer season. And I go on location and set up, on any given day, and then paint in succession. These 14 by 11 panels, I start them in succession as time, as the weather's changing and time is, ongoing. Like little time lapse shots in a movie or something. And then each one could be 5 minutes to half an hour, depending on the piece, or even an hour, but usually it's fairly quick because things are changing a lot. And then I do as many as I have the energy to do on location. So on this one day was 4, and on this day right here was 2, and on this day down here was, holy crap, 8.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot.
Wow.
That was a big day. I was out there a long time, and each moment, I just sort of held a certain chunk of time, and then I bring them back to the studio and work on them until they're finished paintings. And for me, 14 by 11 is a smaller size to work in, but over time, what it allowed me to do was tell this story about time and change amidst a constant subject. House Mountain right here is the background, and the composition is identical essentially in every piece. And then you get to ask this kind of question of, where did the mountain go in a cloudy day? Or here it is in the sunrise day, and you can see the fire smoke that came through the area on this particular day and here, but then down here, the bottom, it's all gone, in this spot. And stuff like that is sort of this idea I'm working on over the course of the last year. And so each season that I've done has 72 panels, and the installations are between either 10 feet tall ish by 12 feet tall, or 6 feet by 23, depending on how I hang them. And this one is spring, and then on the ground is fall that I'm working on. So and then I have winter in sort of a special process right now.
It's so interesting, because one, a lot of artists get together and through school, and then even after, and there's a really well-established group here in Denver that they hire a model every Wednesday, and they meet in Dan's Brick Studio, and it's just various numbers, and they pose the model. And sometimes it's quick sketches, and sometimes it's the same pose for hours. But it's making me think that the House Mountain is doing that work for you, in a sense.
I suppose so. Yeah, I've thought sometimes that this project is almost a portrait project of the mountain. Conversely, over time, it's also because of the repetition, it's sort of like when you repeat a word over and over again, that the word changes its sense after a while. And that has absolutely happened for me with the mountain, where it became about just being present in the fact that I never see the mountain accurately. Doing this as this much times, I would have thought that I would feel like I know the mountain better by now, because I've painted 300 panels. It's a lot,
Wow.
and all the same composition, different days. And in some senses, I know the mountain much better than I did. And in other ones, it's really apparent to me how much my mood or my,
Oh.
artifacts of my own bias as a person affect what I see. And so that's been a pretty compelling experience about looking repeatedly at this subject, like you're saying, that's sitting there every day for me, essentially.
The other thing, and I'm going to click back over, I'm going to screen share again. The other thing that you and I have talked about over I would say over the last couple of years or more, is that you also work in a series. And so we have 3 paintings here, and I'm going to click on them, but 10,000 Mountains, Summer Nights, and then Summer Light and Summer Shadow.
Mhm.
And so we do have all of 3 of these from this series, the 14 by 11 series, and they just look so wonderful together as well. But would you talk about the idea of painting in a series, and because quite honestly, photographers tend to work in a series, right? But but you don't hear a lot of painters working in a series in this way. What are the benefits of exploring in a series like this?
Yeah. I mean, initially, I didn't start out thinking I would do this. This is, in the, like what you were saying, in the last several years has been something that increasingly is the center point of my practice. I think for me over time, I was going around sort of stalking these, mystically magnificent Western vistas and big sunsets and sunrises. And I would go out, when I didn't have a daughter, I would go out and wake up whenever I wanted in the middle of the night and drive for 2 hours to be at sunrise under O'Keefe's mountain, or what I mean, whatever it is. And that had a sort of allure in the wild, wide open horizons feeling and literal, content of the paintings. And I think after a while, that started to end up oddly feeling monotonous, which is sort of the inverse of what's happened with the mountain series, especially, or any of the other locations that I work on repeatedly now. That over time, what I started to ask more was, well, okay, so there are amazing things everywhere in the world, and I love to paint them from time to time, specifically this amazing sunset. But what seems more compelling to me is the nuance and the dimension, of a particular place and how it changes through time. And I thought, for one, as a painter, I think there's a lot to learn from repeated engagement with one subject over time, because it takes an artist, 5 months to paint a certain painting, or a year or 20 years or whatever. I mean, however long of engaging one painting, there's also, engaging one subject through a variety of works allows all these different faces, so to speak, to show, to reveal themselves. And in that, I find I personally learn a lot more as an artist in the creative process, which is, where why I engage it. And then I find the conversations I've gotten to have, as a result of these series, the 10,000 Mountains being one of them, have been really meaningful for me personally, and seem to be, rich in a way that I hadn't anticipated.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's, in some senses, the more you paint, the more you practice, the better at it you get. So there's that element. But then beyond that, there's something where a deep affinity and interaction with something over time, to me, feels like it opens up the door to a lot, to unexpected terrain and domains of thinking and experience that I personally value highly.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I wanted, the last thing for the moment that I want to call to attention of people who are listening in and who will go back and watch this video, is the surface of your work. And it's something that I definitely want to talk to our other 2 artists on the call today about, especially you, David. But I want you to talk about the surface of the work. And I'm just going to make a little comparison here that you probably wouldn't make on your own, but Chinese brush painting. So, and I'm going to toss it out there because, and in particular, I'm just really kind of looking at this painting, and that, so with Chinese brush painting, there's a lot of build up to what the final is, because you put that down, and if you didn't do it right, it's destroyed. The paper's destroyed.
Mhm.
right? That's not what you have to deal with. But what I'm really wanting to call attention to are things like this stroke right here,
Mhm.
and the certainty and the confidence in that stroke, just to create this definition of the mountain that you're studying, every day, and doing it. And so even though you don't have the same pressure of a brush filled with ink, you still have to come at it with a certainty, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're right in the sense that if I mess up, I don't ruin the paper, but I do have to scrape the painting down. Like,
Yeah.
so there is that with this amount of paint, I can't, there's a lot of mixing I do on the surface. There's a lot of things that happen that may be, adjustments, but when my painting is at its best, in my opinion, for my personal interests, there's a definite, like you're saying, there's a clarity with a single mark that expresses a whole world within one mark. And so a mark, like that ridge of the paint, of the mountain that you're talking about, if that's successful, in my estimation, hopefully the mark will say, I am paint, I am color, and somehow there's also this suggestion of this illusion that is a mountain. And in that dual function and one thing existing as two, this idea, a mark can also mean a mountain, but it's still just paint, and that being apparent, not just hidden in a lot of other marks, for me is something I really aspire to make entire paintings of one day, where every mark has that
Yeah.
clarity and skill. I think it's hard to do, but the Chinese ink stuff, I know where we have to move on to David. Francois Chang has a wonderful book called Empty and Full that I've been reading last year over and over again, and the sort of parallels between my personal philosophical reasons for doing art and the expression, this idea of this breath, and how you can get something that has this expression of breath right in one mark and you've got it. Like, that's real at the heart of why I also think series end up being something powerful, is that over time there's a distillation that happens to the point where I find, at least for me, I feel like I'm learning more about what it might be to get something at a very deep, essential place and express it in one moment and have that be elegant. I mean, those painters you speak of work an entire lifetime to get that perfect single mark for a reason. It's very hard to have an unadulterated moment of expression really truly pass through onto a paper or panel.
Wow. Hey, would you do me a favor and put the name of that? Yes. And Charlotte is also asking for the name of the book and the author. Would you put that in the chat for us?
Yeah, sure. You got it. Yeah.
Also, Blake Welch, thank you. He writes, these pieces, Javon, are truly amazing in person, scale, color, texture. Can't wait to see this one live. It is truly just a magnificent show. I really am so excited to open the doors for everybody. Javon, go nowhere, my friend.
Got it.
And if you wouldn't mind, pop that book title in the chat.
Yep.
David Grossman, you are up to bat.
Here I am.
How are you?
Oh, doing well, Rose. Glad to be here with you.
Good. Your life is about to change, hey?
Yep, my wife and I are expecting a baby beginning of March, so which is coming up fast. It's not far from now.
Yeah, well, especially when we just skip completely over November, then it comes even quicker.
Yeah, definitely.
So Javon, David, you and Javon are friends, been out go painting, and I bet this is quite the funny painting duo to watch. Javon with his huge kettle of paint and throwing paint around, and you with these brush strokes that we're going to really dive into the surfaces. So how many years is it now you've been in the core show? Is it 10? Is it 8? 9?
Oh, good question. I think it's a little bit less than that. I think it's either 8 or 9.
Yeah. I don't even know where to start with. So David was an artist who popped into the show on a tour and came up to me and said, "Hey, would you look at my work?" And I'm like, "Sure, of course." Finally got to see his work and was absolutely blown away. And I always tell people when they stand in front of your work that they have met you. It's kind of an interesting thing, I think. And, I want to pull up your work here too and do a screen share. And I think it's something for people to kind of look at, especially if you go to David's website. And your website is just beautiful the way it's laid out, but you can see past pieces. And as you go through all this work, you can see this subtle change and progression through the work, which I just so love and admire, in that I feel like as an artist, you are such a searching soul for, I don't know what that is inside of you, but it's it keeps you on this search. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, well, you said that so beautifully, Rose. And I was just thinking this morning back on the chorus show and how much my work has changed since that first show. I think, but yeah, you're right. I think there is something in me that is always searching and experimenting, and I part of that is just the joy of painting and finding new colors and just a couple of the paintings for the chorus show. This time I started as finger paintings, just with my
Oh my God.
hands and using my fingers to get the kind of the rhythms of the trees. And so there's just always some, new idea, new way of trying something that keeps me going.
Wow. Wow. And so you do also paint on the spot. And I'm kind of shifting the term from plein air to on the spot as sort of a comparison with you and Javon, in that I feel like even though those are complete paintings, I have a sense that they're just sort of like tone poems, or thinking through what you're seeing in a way. Is that, how would you describe those works you do outside on location?
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think of them differently than my studio paintings. For one thing, I mean, like Javon was saying, things, the light changes so fast, or you you have a swarm of gnats that comes and lands in your painting. So you have to really be on your toes. And for me, I feel like the most I can do is about a 7 by 12 inch painting before
Mm.
it's changed too much. Um, so these smaller paintings, and I have a couple of them in the show,
Mhm.
they're really my way of being in a place and observing it for however long, an hour or two. Um, and just being able to watch the colors change and
Mm.
absorb whatever the atmosphere may be in that day. And also it's a time for me to observe what I'm feeling in that place, and maybe capture some of that emotion.
That's what I was going to ask. Are these paintings on the spot, are they about capturing things that you're going to expand on, or is it about responding to your emotional state of mind when you're in that spot?
Yeah, I think they've become much more of an intuitive um,
Mm.
emotional response for
Mhm.
me. And then when I'm back in my studio, I surround myself with these paintings, and I draw different ideas from different ones. And maybe there was a particular moment when I was out painting that just really struck me, and I want to expand on it and be able to kind of dwell in that moment for
Mhm.
a few months as I make my
Uh-huh.
studio painting.
Yeah.
So it is a very different process.
Yeah. Wow. Let's go to some of the paintings, and I'm going to start off with actually one of the large studio paintings. And these paintings really, seeing them in person is, it just can't, I just can't express how different it is to see them in person. But I'm pulling this one up first, in the forest at dark. And so, and this is quite a large painting. I can't remember the size. Do you know it off the top of your head?
It's a 40 by 60, which is big for me. I haven't gone quite Javon dimensions yet.
Yeah. But this one, so the interesting thing that happens when you walk into this painting, and I wonder if I can do this. When you walk into this painting, I'm just going to take this off here just for a second, because what happens is all of this shimmering light through the branches, this just actually moves. It moves on the wall in this really fascinating way. And then all of a sudden it starts to do this. It just starts to really like this, just as I'm showing you, it opens up like that. And the subtlety of these three deer who are watching you. And I think this is almost like if you've ever come across deer out on a hike, it's sort of how this happens. It's like they've seen you long before you see them. Mm-hmm. In this painting, in the most brilliant way, captures what happens in nature like that. I'm just, okay, that's my interpretation of it. Tell me how this painting came together.
Yeah, well, that was beautiful. Thank you. This painting, it's an idea I keep going back to over the past few years, where when I'm in the woods, in the forest, to me, oftentimes it starts to feel like a cathedral. And especially if I'm looking out at the colors of the sky through this web of branches and trunks, I think of stained glass windows, and for me, it's very much that sense of being in a place that's sacred and peaceful and just inviting me to be at peace. So that was the initial idea emotionally, is to try to capture some of that feeling of peace and kind of just letting my mind and my eyes wander through these spaces of color transition.
Wow.
Wow. And the deer, I actually added a little bit later in the process. I wanted something to give it a bit of scale so that you could maybe have a sense of the enormity of being surrounded by the forest. Yeah. And also, like you were saying, Rose, oftentimes when I'm out in the woods painting or hiking or whatever, I see deer, and we have deer in our backyard very frequently too. Yeah. And I absolutely love watching them, and they always see me, before I see them. Mm-hmm. And I've been amazed at how curious they can be, and they'll just kind of, circle me while I'm painting sometimes, and just sort of keep wandering a little bit closer and try to see what it is that I'm doing in their space. And so adding that element of kind of that conversation between us as the viewers and nature, I think the deer were a way for me to do that too.
Yeah. I want to, I'm going to click to the next painting, but I want to, for those of you who don't know, David and his sister, yes?
Two sisters, yeah, one older, one younger.
Oh, middle child, just like me, that's the middle child syndrome. So born in the US, but your parents were missionaries and you grew up in South America?
Yeah, mostly in Chile. I was 2 years old when we moved from the States. We lived there till I was 14.
Yeah. So I think I bring that up because again, this idea, I feel like you've really met David when you step into these works. But I think there's also that element of, your past and who you are and what you bring to it. Javon bringing his East Coast sensibility to the New Mexican landscape, and you bringing this really gentle spirit, nurtured in your family and and that growing up and in South America, and then bringing it to the landscape as you're doing it. And these I feel like your work, and in a lot of respects, Javon as well. And I don't mean to leave Shawn Michael Chavez out of this, but we're going to get to him in a very different way. But your work is less landscape painting and more portrait of the land, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Would you talk about this one, Fireweed Forest? And I'm going to blow it up here.
Yeah. So, and I love that distinction, Rose, thinking of these as portraits, which I think is very true. And also, I heard someone say that every painting is a self-portrait of the artist, whatever it may be, which is,
Yeah,
I think is apt as well. And so,
Mhm.
so for this painting, I was wandering through the woods and I came across this hill that was just filled with wildflowers called fireweed. And I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're just this vibrant, I don't know if fuchsia is the right word, but like a deep pink color.
Yeah.
And it was at dusk, so there was this, bright glowing sky and bright glowing flowers, and the flowers themselves almost felt like embers that were kind of scattered around under the tree trunks, because they were glowing so amazingly. And so that I wanted to paint it because it just was such a special moment, along with that sense of just that hush and quiet of being in the woods at dusk.
Wow.
So this is one that I started as a finger painting. I kind of filled the panel with color field and the space of the flowers, and then put gloves on and just use my fingers to kind of draw these lines and get the sense of rhythm of the tree trunks.
Wow. There's nothing in here that is, I believe there's no brush stroke in here that isn't thought of first. And what I would call people's attention to is, in particular, watch how this golden yellow starts to warm and turn orangey red all the way across in here, as the sun sets. And even the reds and the intensity of them and how they shift down through the painting. And then all of these trees from this almost fluorescent blue, and as they just kind of get more subtle in here, as he's pulling our eye across, and then again just sort of drift away on this side. I mean, there's just, when you stand in front of these works, it's sort of like Javon does with that one brush stroke, that thick brush stroke. Yours are these little tiny brush strokes that are each just really have a purpose as they lie one next to the other.
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful description. And I do, part of what I do in my studio is think through those transitions. And these paintings are ones that I've worked on for months, and just slowly kind of building the color shifts and thinking through what those transitions might be, and how hopefully people's eyes might be drawn to different parts of the painting because of those color shifts. And I think hopefully my paintings are an invitation for people to kind of step close and maybe take a closer look at the textures and see how those shifts came about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you do see people just get in there and stand there for a long time, which is just so much fun to see. And so Full Moon Through the Trees, this is another one. And this one is, this one shows more of that underpainting and the texture that you're playing with, which I also think is just this really kind of I don't know if step forward is the right thing, but maybe it just sort of shows us more of you experimenting and playing with not just what the image is, but the surface below the image, to use that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that really appeals to me as an artist is the surface that things are made on. And maybe part of that is I come from a family of quilters. My wife, my mom, my sisters, my grandmother, great grandmother, all have been quilters. And so I've been surrounded by these, two-dimensional, beautiful objects. And I do think about that when I'm painting and trying to, even though there's an illusion of depth, it's a flat surface.
Yeah.
And that's the dynamic that I find intriguing.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that. That's a new one. But you do get that sense of even the stitch work in some of your paintings. Wow.
Yeah. And I think also maybe the simplicity of design, like that winter painting, it's just, trees, moon, sky, and snow. So on the surface, it's simple, but then hopefully as you look at it, you find the subtleties.
Right. And this one, so this is a 7x12, the Aspen Grove. Is this one that you actually painted outside on location?
It is, yeah. This one and the small summer Aspen Grove are both on location.
Wow. Okay. Let me see this one right here too. These seem just like such meditations on the land in a way to me. Very calming.
Oh, thank you. Well, these are both places that are really special to me, that are close to where I live here.
Oh.
I go back often. Every season I go back and I visit my trees and I paint them.
Wow. When you and I were talking, this was a couple of years ago now, but I remember we brought up the concept of, I think it's Shinrin-yoku, the Japanese forest bathing concept of getting back to yourself is to go out and bathe, be bathed by the forest. And you get that sense in your work, actually.
Well, thank you. That's an idea that I've come back to very frequently. And that's, I think, when I feel most at peace is when I'm wandering through the woods or just, out watching a sunset.
Yeah. Okay, so hang tight. We're going to go to Shawn Michael Chavez, and I'm going to read a couple comments here. Gina, thank you for this. This is such a heartwarming interview. Thank you so much. Will this recording be able to share with others? Yes, indeed it will. And so we have a techie guy who comes in and just sort of cleans it up a little bit for us. And in fact, I've got to kind of get on that and find out when he's going to have time to do that and get those up, because I know other people have asked for them. So yes, it will be on the website at thecoorswesternart.com, and there's a tab for Inside the Artist Studio. So thank you for asking that. Charlotte, the color effects are so magical even on a screen, and they really are. More so when you just get to be in front of them in person. Javon, love this piece. Yeah, me too. And okay, and the problem is that I always hang these shows and realize how little money I have in my bank account, because I want all of it. It's really, but I get to live with it for a couple of months. So that's always nice. And Dan Stevenson, how did you achieve the cool crinkle effect? David, that one for you. Do you want to answer that one quick?
Sure. Yeah. Some of that is the surface I paint on. So they're wooden panels, and there's a thin layer of linen adhered to the panel, and several layers of gesso, which is like a primer on top of that, and sanded. So some of the texture of the cloth shows through. So that gives it that kind of crinkly, woven look sometimes.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, Shawn Michael Chavez, you're up to bat. Okay, and the spotlight is on you. So We finally maybe will get to meet in person. Yeah, your first show was last year, right? The COVID year.
Yes, with Coors, that is true. Yeah, so some of this is new to me. The Zoom thing I got to do last year, but yeah, we kept all of our paintings in our studio and shipped them out directly from our studio last year. So there's some new stuff going on this year for my experience, for sure.
Yeah. So we will be in person this year. Hooray. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to the top of the hour, but welcome. So I'm so glad you could be on this call. And so immediately people are just really drawn to your work. You have this pretty distinct style, but you're also kind of marrying a couple things that I would really like you to talk about. You're marrying a tradition in a number of ways. One, tradition in art, subject matter. You're working in oils, but also there's sometimes mixed media on the surface. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But then the second thing that I feel like you're really marrying has to do with subject matter. And so, well, people could look at these and say that there is this sort of a looking back at the history of, especially in particular, New Mexico. But there's also your own heritage that you're bringing in. Yes?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I've always sort of lived my life in two different worlds, and that sort of being contemporary, looking forward, and also having appreciation for heritage and lineage in the past. And I felt like throughout my career, both as a painter and a graphic artist, I've always kind of walked that line. Much as I've worked on a computer, I've worked on letterpress machines and doing things in a traditional hands-on sort of manner as well. And so my paintings, in terms of their subject and approach, that's kind of a natural place for me to go, is sort of in the in-between, and kind of make a mixture of different elements. And try to make it good.
And thematically, and I'm going to just hop on a screen share here with your work now, but thematically, let's talk about some of this work and where your inspiration comes from. And I'm clicking on Armadura. Am I saying that? Armadura?
Yeah. Like this is just, a lot of, hard to say where my paintings come from in terms of their catalyst. Really, it's just kind of some sort of subconscious thing, I suppose. And I sort of see this image in my head that I sort of just need to purge and get out into canvas somehow. And once I kind of have that vision or have worked that out in my head, then I kind of just reach out to all the different resources that I need in order to accomplish that image. Sometimes that includes a model, sometimes that includes collage, of course, sketching and drawing, and then just working out all of these different parts. Really like collage. I mean, it's not traditional collage in the sense of taking newspapers or magazines and doing that, but it's a mental collage and physical collage and a reality collage of sometimes getting a model, sometimes sorry, my computer's doing a little something there. Getting a model, or being on a hay bale. Depends on what the resources I have today and how urgent it is that I need to get that image out.
Yeah. So I always like to tell people that former illustrators are some of my favorite people to work with. So jokingly, you all know how to hit a deadline because it was beaten into you. But really this way of kind of imagining a painting, and it's really kind of different. And illustrators are also open to using all kinds of different tools. And so I wonder if you would, and let's just kind of talk about this one here briefly, and then we're going to move on to some of the other ones, but a number of things. One, you're using some really interesting graphic elements here, like putting these design lines that kind of come through in a grid. And I remember when I was first looking at your work, and I hadn't seen it in person at that point, and I was asking you about these surfaces. and why you were using these grids in your surface. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I call that the armature, really, and it's a traditional technique going back to classical, like Renaissance art, and it's just a way, really, of transferring a smaller image to a larger image through using a grid. I know that in the Western world or in school, I'm sure we've all seen the sort of square grid.
Yep.
This is a little bit more complicated in that it can provide ways for dividing up the canvas, also in pi, basically, into the rhythm of nature, and repeat onto the canvas. And I just, some of what I do and how I create my images is through appreciating and emphasizing mistakes or experimentation. And if that mistake works, I'll reuse it somehow or try to emphasize it in the next painting until it starts to develop on its own and become stylistic, I suppose, or recognizable or iconic in its own way. It becomes part of the signature.
So, I have to ask you, what's the mistake here? Or what was the mistake?
The lines, for instance, that you had asked specifically, that was just an experimentation on my behalf. I've been using those to sort of create compositions to transfer drawings and such. Yeah. But on one particular painting, I decided, what the heck, I'm just going to leave those exposed to try to show some of the process of the painting. And to my surprise, there was a lot of positive feedback that I had gotten on that. I really thought that people would think, what is this? This is terrible, too abstract or something like that. And it was more extreme than these. But through feedback that I had received, I was like, well, this is interesting. Let me explore that some more. And it's just something that I've sort of stuck with since, actually.
Yeah. And that, I just can't stress how important it is in my mind as a curator for artists to be experimenting and making mistakes. Exactly like you say. I mean, I don't think, a lot of artists would necessarily say I'm making mistakes, but they're really like mistakes or whatever you want to do. I'm just play or happy accidents or something is really how this stuff kind of keeps moving forward. Right. So Crossing the Ridge is the next one that I want to pull up again with your grid lines still in here or imposed.
Yeah, they are. Sometimes they're more subtle than other times, certainly in person or at a larger scale to see that the armature revealed.
Yeah.
But, I'm constantly trying to, within this genre of painting, figurative landscape, traditional in many ways, and paying homage to a lot of the Western masters, to still try to find my own way to be innovative within that. Sort of the challenge I've placed on myself in creating these works.
That's an interesting thing to say because, we all have to pay homage to those who have come before us. And certainly these days in the Western world, it's a pretty big field and at times kind of crowded. And so to really be able to not say, hey, I'm completely unique, I don't know who those people are, but just to really give them kind of a nod, but also use it for your own work. I think that's something that I feel like in your work, you're really bridging with how you're putting these together.
I appreciate that.
So tell me about this one, this night painting. And I love these night scenes. Javon has one, and David plays around a lot with these in the gloaming, as the sun is leaving us and as the morning light is coming in. And but being in the night sky has challenges all of its own, even if you're a studio painter and just trying to kind of make something that makes sense to all of us. What inspired this painting?
Again, it's just one of those visions. I think this is titled Evening Caravan or something like that. Caravan at night or something.
Yeah, Midnight Caravan.
Midnight Caravan. Yeah, and so the concept was really just to kind of create this serene atmosphere. And also, I like to put a lot of secondary discoveries into my paintings. So that's a painting where you really see the breath as has been expressed earlier, of the painting. But then you start to see these other secondary discoveries, that being the sheep that are on the bottom. At first, you might think, first glance, you think those are bushes or trees or something like that.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's a sheep, that's a sheep. And so consistently through my work, I do try to put places that lead you to the eye and then some place to find a discovery for the viewer.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So that, I think, is the link between the three of you, these discoveries as your paintings open up. Okay. This one opened up really big. Is this one a self-portrait? I'm just going to say that right now. Look.
It is not. I mean, they're all self-portraits, right? Yeah, I don't recall honestly where this particular image from. On these images, this is, and you can see these ones back here in my studio too. That's a style that I've really been trying to push in terms of painting something that's familiar in an unfamiliar way, or trying to make it unique and something of my own. We've all, bust portraits, so to speak, but trying to put my own language into that subject matter. And so the painting you were just showing is my journey in trying to discover and develop that sort of style. And it is, again, like painting the same thing over and over again, with the same colors over and over again, but rediscovering it every time you approach it.
Wow. Okay. So believe it or not, we're running right up against the 1 o'clock hour. These always go by so fast, and it cracks me up when artists get nervous, because I'm like, you won't even remember you were on this call at some point. But I'm going to remove the spotlight, and I'm going to pull up all of you. And what I love to do is just ask everybody who's listening in, if you have questions for our artists today, please go ahead and add them to the chat. I will just do a quick little public service announcement that the show we're going to rehang the show. We're going to put it all out on January 3rd, which is the Monday, if you'd like a preview. January 4th is our gala opening night. And after that, the show will open in a modified form because of space restrictions during the National Western Stock Show, January 8th through the last Sunday of the month. So questions, and artists, please, I'd like to open it up for you three. If you have questions and comments for each other, here you go.
Yeah, it was nice to see both of you guys' work on the call today. David, I had a thought or question I figured I'd ask, which is that you were talking some, and Rose, you were bringing up David's sort of progression from, first chorus to now. And he and I met, about 10 years ago. So I met him early on, and I was thinking about it too, especially with some of these, the Fireweed one is like a trip, man. I mean, it's basically an abstract painting, like you could it just looks like color field. And then of course it's not. But so I see a pretty vast progression from the really formally tight, accurate, traditional Hudson River School feeling stuff, I mean, in some ways, and of the early work to now. When you, along that path from then to here, have you known when you're pushing into places? Is it something that you you feel something, and is it just, are you following intrigue alone, or do you have like this feels stiff, so I want to push into something loose, or like, do you have a sense of the dynamics that have been at play for you? I'm curious, what you would say about the dynamics in that really apparent transition in my mind and to my eye. But I just, the dynamics intrigue me. If you have any, that's pretty obtuse, but maybe you do.
No, that's a really good question. Thank you. Now, I think you're right. I think some of it is just maybe following that sense of intrigue and finding an idea that I find exciting, and just going for it. I think maybe some of it is hopefully being a little bit less driven about what other people might be thinking about what I do or what I'm painting. And
Oops, did we lose we lost
art history. I think that's been a big part of it for me.
Would you repeat that last part? David, you said being a little less concerned about what other people might be thinking, and then it went out. It dropped out for a sec.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So just, I think giving myself the freedom to experiment has been a big shift in thinking. And then I was saying too, studying art history has been a big part of that process, and finding other artists whose work resonates with me for whatever reason,
Mhm.
and kind of exploring what those reasons might be.
Mhm. I mean, I remember we talked about Klimt, at some point in forests, a while back, and I mean, stuff like that makes sense. And the summer aspen study that you did, I was just sitting there thinking, it's like I couldn't tell if I was thinking Pizarro or if I was thinking like impressionists or pre-impressionists, but something was so dense in the feeling of something, so I certainly can see art history in a lot of what you're doing. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we are over the hour. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming on this call and all your thoughts and questions. Marla, thank you for this. She commented, I follow a wonder. Amazing question, Javon. I agree. And wonderful conversation. Yes, thank you. So I want to wish you all a very happy holiday season. We will be back tomorrow evening with yet another installment of Inside the Artist Studio. And I will crack the whip and get my audio visual guy to post these for us, these conversations. This has just been really wonderful. Thank you, Shawn, Michael Chavez, for being here, David Grossman and Javon Lee. You guys are just wonderful, and it's such a joy to know you all. And I can't wait for you to come and see the show and see this wonderful work that's up here. So really have a fabulous holiday season, and we'll look forward to talking to you all soon.
Thanks so much, Rose. Nice to see you guys both on the call, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
You so much.
So much.
Cool. Been good.
Take care, everybody.